Justin Melo of the Draft Network joining us on the Western Hotline. Chelsea, good morning. Jeremy and Joe, thanks for taking some time, and welcome to Combine Week.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine, gentlemen. It's certainly one of the best weeks on the NFL calendar, especially if you're an NFL draft fanatic like I am. It really represents the last critical event, in the pre-draft process. The All-Star Showcase is behind us, the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Hula, the Tropical. We learned a lot from those events, and this is our final opportunity. We'll get into some pre-draft 30 visits, of course, after this, but this is really, really a critical event on the NFL draft calendar.
How has it changed over the years, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, the league's done a great job monetizing it, in all honesty, right? Like, remember we used to have all the drills, like, in the morning, and now you get primetime stuff. Like, we got the quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers going on Saturday this year, which has obviously, been the case the last little bit, but that's not a shock because that's what everyone wants to watch. All of a sudden NFL fans are tuning into the Combine on Saturday at primetime. Bunch of angry wives saying, I thought the season was over. But they've done a great job monetizing it. Athletes have taken more control, I would say. You mentioned there before bringing me on about Shador not throwing. I think that's a pretty common theme with some of the top athletes, certainly at the quarterback position, opting out of the drills. That's nothing new. We saw that last year. And it certainly, before you ask, it didn't impact what teams thought of those guys, and it certainly didn't impact their ability to perform at a high level throughout their rookie season. So there's been a lot of change to the schedule, and certainly you're seeing some of the top athletes do less and less.
Do you hear the teams also speaking more and more about how the value of it is just meeting with them more than the actual, not that the testing's irrelevant at all, but that maybe these GMs are getting more value now from Combine Week about talking and meeting with these players than the actual drills on the field?
Well, I think that's always been the case to a degree. Perhaps it's a bit more evident now, again, that a lot of these athletes are opting out. And by the way, the schedule changes. The NFL brought this on themselves a little bit. Like, the schedule changes over the last couple of years made it less favorable for the athletes, and that's when them collaborating, of course, with their agents, decided to take control and say, we're opting out of some of this stuff because the schedule is just out of hand. I don't want to be running the 40 at 7 p.m. on Saturday evening when I've been up since, 7. I've been up 12 hours already, and I've been doing medical rechecks and meeting with teams early in the morning, and now you expect me to go perform at my best, and if I don't, you're going to knock me for it, because I didn't run my fastest time at 7:30 p.m. or whatever, 5:30, 5:45, doesn't matter. So certainly as some of the athletic testing has started to take a bit of a backseat, some of the off-field stuff, the medical rechecks, the interview process, they've always been important, but they've certainly become even more important.
Right, because that number, especially for the 40 time, that number gets stapled to you for your entire career. Like, we were talking about Hollywood Brown as like just for free agency stuff, and I looked at, what do I look up to see how fast Hollywood Brown is? What was his 40 time in the draft? And maybe he could have ran that faster, and he wasn't one of the guys that ran it slow. But it's interesting you think about that number specifically, that test, because those guys, that's their number for like their whole careers.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. So now we're making them run it much later in the day, so we can monetize it a bit more, so we can capture a national audience. But that has an impact, right? No one wants to run it at 5:30, 6 p.m., right?
Yeah.
But that's what the schedule is making them do to a degree. And as you said, it doesn't, are all of us going to think of this? Unfortunately, no, because what are we going to do? As you said, 7 years later, that's roughly how long Hollywood's been in the league, we've still got it stapled to his forehead, right? So it's like, you're going to see this more and more every year, where less and less athletes are participating in the athletic drills. Certainly the quarterbacks have kind of driven the bus on that in these last little bit, and you're going to see it again this year. Like, I'll be stunned. We haven't heard on Cam Ward yet. I'll be fairly surprised, if he does participate in everything. It certainly changed the way that they've got to evaluate this process.
Is there a receiver this year, as we entered like the combine and the testing? We'll get to other positions for the Bills. Is there a receiver you expect that could run like a 40 or another test that we're going to be hearing about how high their draft stock rose this week because they tested so well?
There are a couple guys that come to mind that I think deserve more credit. Savion Williams from TCU This is a guy that had a pretty good year this year, 60 catches for 611 yards, 6 touchdowns. He was also, by the way, he also ran for like a bunch of yards and had 6 rushing touchdowns as well. So he was the focal point of their offense. He hit 40 inches on the vertical last offseason while training. That was per Bruce Feldman's Freaks list. So that's one that I think he also hit. He surpassed 22.5 miles per hour on the GPS as a sprinter. Now, I'll remind you, this is a big-bodied guy. This is a very, very big guy. We're talking about 225 pounds and over 6'2", 6'3". So if he goes out there and posts numbers like that, 40 on the vertical, that's going to do him wonders. Daquan Felton, the receiver from Virginia Tech, he's 6'5", 223. This is a towering prospect. He had 23 miles per hour on the treadmill at one point. And he's also probably going to clear 11 feet in the broad jump. Now, I'll remind you, last year's best result in the broad for a receiver was A.D. Mitchell from Texas. He had 11.3. Well, Daquan Felton's certainly going to threaten that mark. And at 6'5", 223, that's going to be incredibly impressive. Another guy that I think, you talked about the 40. There's a Canadian who played ball at Stanford, Alika Yomenor. He ran 10.76 in the 100 and 22.65 in the 200 while he was at Massachusetts Deerfield Academy. So this is a guy that's a pure athlete. Sometimes, in truth, I thought he was maybe a better athlete than football player. But we know sometimes you put these results up at the combine, and these things will increase your pre-draft stock. So he's got a chance to run the 40 in the 4.3. And if he does that, certainly, at his size, you're talking about a guy that can certainly improve his pre-draft stock. So those receivers come to mind. There's also one at Notre Dame, Bo Collins, a bit underrated, 41 catches this year. He's going to clear 41 inches in the vertical jump, a scout told me, and that would certainly be one of the more eye-opening results for the receivers.
Justin Melo, the Draft Network, joining us. Justin, all this talk about receiver drills and all that, I'm thinking back to last year's combine. Worthy did steal the show with the 40, but Keon Coleman, who the Bills ultimately drafted, had a really good number in the gauntlet drill, just as play speed. And I wonder where we are now and where, as you evaluate prospects, testing tells you some stuff, whether it's the 40 or the 3-cone shuttle gauntlet, whatever it might be. What do you think is the best indicator of separation ability? The tape is there, of course, but the tape is against college corners. What do teams value the most of the drills?
I think you bring up a great point. As we all pay attention to the 40, I certainly think the gauntlet is more important because that's the closest you're going to get to watching something that really translates to Sundays, right? The 40 is great and dandy, and of course some of it translates. You can't go out there and run 4.66, right? And that'll tell you right there, no, this is someone that doesn't have the speed necessary to play in this league, and you probably can't separate either because of it. But when I look at the gauntlet drill, the ability to change direction, focus on catching the football. They're being thrown at you, it feels like, from all angles. I think, again, you get to showcase your hands. You show that drops aren't an issue. You change direction effortlessly. You're really more so running a route, if you will, than you are in the 40, where you're really just running one route really translates, right, which is a go. So certainly the gauntlet, and then you talked about the L drill. Is certainly really incredibly important. I think that measures short area quickness, which does a great job of being an indicator of being able to separate, especially at the top of routes. If you can run a great L drill and you're changing direction effortlessly, it means you're stopping on a dime as well, which is the 3-cone, by the way. They're interchangeable. 3-cone is the L drill. If you can run a great 3-cone, I think you are showing some serious separation ability. And historically speaking, the 3-cone result for receivers has been significantly more telling and predictive of next-level success than the 40 has. So for me, look, we all get swept up in the 40. I get it. I do too a little bit. I love watching it. I enjoy watching a guy like Xavier Worthy shatter the record on national television. But if you really want to figure out, what you should be paying attention to and what's predictive of next-level success, pay attention to that gauntlet. Now, there's no time attached to the gauntlet, really, right? So it's hard for the average fan to kind of put a result on it. But you're looking for the smoothness of the player. You want to see him catch every ball. You want to see him change direction effortlessly. And then the L drill, they don't all run it anymore. But the ones that do, anything, 6'9", 7, 6'9", anything under 7 is elite in the 3-cone, and anything just a hair over 701, 702, 703 is really, really indicative of a guy that changes direction well.
How about with defensive line? That's the position we're looking at the most. How meaningful one is the combine for that position versus the receivers we're talking about? And is there anybody you think Bills fans should keep an eye on that could have a big week at that position?
Well, I think there are some similarities in the sense where, first of all, with the 40, I think if you measure the initial 10 yards, right, because that's going to give you an idea of short area explosiveness and quickness, and that is really notable down there in the trenches, and the L drill for the same reason, right, the ability to generate short area explosiveness and speed is a great indicator of your ability to beat offensive linemen because you have those necessary athletic thresholds, if you will. I think there are a couple of guys that are going to have a really good week. Joshua Farmer, the D tackle from Florida State, I thought he was one of the best performers at the Senior Bowl. I do think the Bills need some interior D-line help. I don't think that kid's getting enough attention. And then Deion Walker, the guy came in, what was he, like 360 or something along at the Senior Bowl. He's like 6'5", 6'6". He's a massive, massive man. And I'll tell you, he plays a little high at times with the pad level. But when he strings together an impressive rep, I mean, you're just going to fall out of your seat. And Walter Nolan as well, the kid from Ole Miss, I love the fit between him and the Bills. I don't think he's going to get there in terms of still being on the board when Buffalo is ready to make their pick, unless they trade up, of course. But you watch him, I expect any drill that measures the short area explosiveness and quickness, he's going to do incredibly well at. He's one of my favorite prospects in this draft, period. I've got a top 15 grade on him. I think he's an elite 3-tech at the next level. I think he's really going to impress in Indy this week.
What other positions are on your mind for the Bills specifically? Like D-line, as we talked about, is probably number one for us. And you just talked about defensive tackle fits, interior for the Bills. But corner, safety, offensive line even maybe to a lesser extent. I don't think they need a starter there by any means. But what comes to your mind when you think about the Bills for this draft?
I do think corner and safety. I know they invested a pick in Cole Bishop last year. He's still of course, it's only been 1 year. He's banged up a little. I think the jury's still out on him and if he's going to develop into a full-time starter. When I look at corner, I think that's an incredibly obvious one, right? I believe Rasul Douglas's contract is up. He's now on the wrong side of 30. I think they need reinforcements there. Kyer Elam, unfortunately, I think the story's probably been written on him. Unfortunately, I think we're probably calling him a first-round bust. I don't see a lot of pathways to him kind of, ever living up to where the Bills drafted him at. When you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs every year, the AFC Championship game, we've seen what it takes, in all honesty. The defense has just not been able to get it done in those moments, right? I think Josh Allen and the offense have put up enough points now on multiple occasions to win that game in the playoffs, and they just haven't, right? So it's about, and you saw the way Philly did it, right? Everyone's going to copy that blueprint. Certainly they need more talent in the trenches, but when I look at corner, I think they need more there as well. And then it's interesting, we talked about some of the off-field stuff at the top of this conversation. I think for the Bills, if they're going corner there in the 20s, the medical rechecks are going to be very important to that process, because two guys that I do think would be on their radar at that pick, if they check out this week, if the medicals check out, it's two corners that had season-ending injuries this year. It's Siobhan Revel from East Carolina. He was largely considered a first-round pick before he went down with an ACL. The hope is it happened early enough where he's going to be, relatively ready to go, even maybe at rookie minicamp, but certainly by training camp. And then the other is Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, who also didn't finish the season due to a season-ending injury. Not quite as serious as Revels was with the ACL, but I think those two guys are potential candidates in the late 20s for Buffalo at corner, and they're going to learn a lot about both of them this week at the Combine with the medical rechecks.
Justin Melo with us. What do you think of the top of the quarterback class? Do you think it's Cam Ward 1?
I do. I think Cam Ward will probably be the first quarterback off the board. Where he goes, I'm not yet convinced. I don't know that it's going to be at number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. I think they're in a bit of an interesting position. It's funny. I think a lot of, I've spoken to scouts in this class who they wish they could combine these two quarterbacks, in my opinion, into one of them, because they're very different skill sets. When you watch Cam Ward, It's the physical upside that blows you away, right? It's the off-script ability. Of course, you guys know it well with Josh Allen down there. It's his ability to maneuver the pocket, get himself out of trouble, and generate an explosive play. I also think he's more accurate than he gets credit for, especially when his top half and his low half are in sync. When his footwork doesn't get play, I think he's got a tendency to kind of try to rely on just the top half, gets a little lazy in his bottom half. But when they're in sync, he throws a gorgeous, accurate ball. I've got no question about his accuracy ability when everything lines up the way that it should. The issue with him, of course, is the turnover-worthy plays. He will put the ball in harm's way sometimes when trying to generate that explosive. When I look at Shedeur Sanders, it's the complete opposite. He is a throwback pocket passer who wins with his mind. I think the physical ability leaves a lot to be desired. I don't think he's got a very strong arm. I think it's a slightly stronger than some recent first-round quarterbacks, but that's not saying much because those guys went on to bust. I'm referring to like Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett. I think the arm is sort of in that range. It's a bit better, but it doesn't wow you. He doesn't have great size. It's okay. And when I talk about arm strength, by the way, a lot of people sort of misconstrue it to say, well, he's got to throw it 80 yards. No, it's the velocity on the ball because at this level, the NFL, those throwing windows, they close so quickly. If you're not able to generate the necessary velocity to exploit that incredibly short window that you have, it's a difference between a completion and an interception a lot of the time. And that's the question scouts have on his game, is his ability to generate velocity on the ball. And he's not going to throw it at the combine, as you said. So that question will continue lingering over his head, I think, throughout this process. But again, if you could combine these two quarterbacks, Shedeur is someone that wins with his mind. It's high football IQ, it's accuracy, it's pre- and post-snap reads and knowing where to go with the football. And Cam Ward, where it's the physical upside, the ability to make every throw, the ability to maneuver the pocket, get himself out of trouble, create by extending the pocket and completing explosives down the field. They're two very different quarterbacks, and they both got their weak points. And I think if you could combine the two of them, you'd have a no-brainer franchise quarterback at number one. But as of right now, teams are a little bit skeptical.
Justin Melo of the Draft Network on the Western Hotline. Justin, thanks very much. Enjoy the Combine.
Pleasure was all mine.
TheDraftNetwork.com. Just picking through there, reading some mock drafts.